What happens when a beloved music legend, known for her grace and decades of timeless performances, walks into a daytime talk show expecting warmth, only to encounter a storm she never saw coming? In a moment that shocked viewers across the country, one unexpected remark turned a friendly interview into one of the most uncomfortable on-air confrontations Loose Women has ever seen. Petula Clark arrived at the Loose Women studio with the same gentle poise that had defined her career for more than half a century. The audience applauded warmly as she walked onto the set, smiling, waving politely, and thanking the crowd. She looked calm, composed, and genuinely happy to be there. For fans, it felt like a nostalgic moment, like a reunion with an old friend they had grown up listening to. But sitting across from her was Denise Welch, whose on-air personality had always been bold, outspoken, and occasionally unpredictable. And today, that unpredictability was about to take center stage. The interview began smoothly. The hosts asked Petula about her music, her long career, her favorite performances, and how she still managed to sing with the same clarity and elegance after all these years. Petula responded with warmth, sharing little stories about her early days in the industry and the experiences that shaped her. But then Denise shifted the tone. With a sudden, sharp question delivered in a blunt tone, she brought up a sensitive topic from Petula's past, one Petula had never publicly discussed in depth and certainly wasn't prepared to revisit live on air. The studio fell silent. The audience froze. Even the other hosts looked confused, as if wondering whether Denise had seriously just gone there. Petula's smile faded instantly. She tried to respond politely, attempting to steer the conversation in a safer direction. But Denise pressed again, louder this time, and with an edge that felt more confrontational than journalistic. The tension on set became thick enough that even viewers at home could feel it. Petula took a deep breath. She glanced at the other hosts, then at the cameras, as if silently asking whether this was really happening. The control room seemed unsure whether to cut to a break. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. And then, for the first time in her decades-long career, Petula Clark did something no one expected. She stood up, her voice calm but firm. She said she would not continue an interview that crossed boundaries she had never agreed to discuss. And with the entire studio watching, she walked off the set, leaving the hosts stunned and Denise speechless. The moment instantly became one of the most talked about walk-offs in daytime TV history. The atmosphere in the Loose Women studio was heavy, almost suffocating, after Petula Clark's sudden departure. The cameras continued rolling, capturing the stunned expressions of the panelists as the audience murmured in disbelief. What had started as a gentle, nostalgic conversation about music had spiraled into a confrontation that no one, including the producers, had anticipated. Denise Welch sat back in her chair, her face a mixture of frustration and vindication. She adjusted her notes, as if that could somehow justify the barrage of questions she had thrown at Petula. Ruth Langford and Janet Street Porter exchanged nervous glances, trying to gauge whether the situation could be salvaged or if it had irreversibly derailed the episode. Colleen Nolan's hands fidgeted in her lap, her eyes darting between Denise and the empty guest chair where Petula had been moments ago. The audience, meanwhile, buzzed with whispered speculation. Some were shocked at Denise's audacity, others at Petula's calm firmness in walking away. A few viewers pulled out their phones, rapidly typing updates to social media. Within minutes, hashtags referencing the incident began trending across platforms. The word walk-off was already appearing in the top searches, alongside comments questioning both the interviewer's methods and the guest's poise. Back on set, Ruth tried to regain control. "Denise, perhaps we should take a deep breath and regroup," she suggested carefully, her tone neutral but cautious. Denise waved her off, still flushed, still convinced that she had done nothing wrong. "No, Ruth. I was asking questions that needed to be asked," she said sharply. Petula just couldn't handle a little scrutiny. "Scrutiny is one thing, Denise," Janet said, her voice measured. "But you went far beyond that. You made it personal. The audience saw it. Petula didn't come here to be interrogated." Denise's eyes flicked to Janet, irritation flashing across her face. "Personal? I was doing my job. If she can't face tough questions, maybe she shouldn't be on live TV." Colleen finally spoke up, her voice calm but firm. Maybe the line got blurred today. Petula handled herself beautifully, but you kept pressing, and it escalated. That's all anyone saw. Denise shook her head. No, they saw a celebrity avoiding accountability. Accountability? Ruth countered gently. She was sharing her story and her experiences. That's not the same as avoiding anything. You pushed boundaries too aggressively. The tension in the studio was palpable. Even the production crew moved careful. As the panelists tried to compose themselves, Denise leaned back, exhaling sharply. She glanced at the empty guest chair again and muttered under her breath. A mixture of defiance and exasperation. They'll see. They'll all see why she left. Ruth, Janet, and Colleen simply exchanged tired, resigned glances, knowing the rest of the show would have to continue, but nothing would feel the same again. The tension lingered in the Loose Women's studio like a thick fog. Even as the cameras rolled for the next segment, there was a noticeable shift in the energy. Ruth Langford tried to maintain her usual composure, speaking with practiced warmth. But the natural flow of the show had been shattered. Every smile seemed forced, every laugh slightly hollow, and every comment carefully measured. The audience, now quieter than usual, sat forward in their seats, still processing what they had just witnessed. Denise Welch, despite her usual confident demeanor, was beginning to feel the weight of the situation. Her notes lay untouched in front of her as she sat rigidly, her eyes darting occasionally to the empty chair where Petula Clark had once been. Inside, there was a mix of triumph and unease. She had believed she was asserting authority, challenging a guest, and uncovering the truth. Yet, the audience reactions, the murmurs, and the sideways glances from her co-hosts hinted that perhaps the execution had gone too far. Janet Street Porter broke the silence, her voice quiet but deliberate. We all witnessed it, Denise. Maybe it's worth reflecting on how quickly things escalated. Petula left with dignity, but this looked chaotic from every angle. Denise's jaw tightened. She left because she couldn't handle the questions. That's the reality. Colleen Nolan, ever the peacemaker, leaned forward slightly. It's not about who can handle what, Denise. It's about respect. You kept pressing and pressing, and she responded the only way she could. Ruth Langford added softly, this isn't just about the moment. The audience at home saw everything unfold in real time. Social media is already buzzing. People are discussing who was right, who was wrong, and it's intense. Denise waved dismissively. Let them talk. I did my job. Tough questions are part of the show. If she couldn't answer, that's on her. A hush fell over the studio as the producers exchanged urgent whispers over headsets, coordinating whether to continue filming or to call a break. The mood was fragile. The rest of the planned segments now felt inconsequential compared to the incident that had just occurred. Every word Denise spoke seemed heavier than intended, weighed down by the shadow of what had happened. The audience's reactions were mixed. Some applauded the stand taken by Petula Clark. Others questioned Denise's aggressive approach. Phones were out, cameras clicked, and snippets of the moment were already being shared online. The episode, initially intended to be lighthearted and celebratory, had turned into a viral conversation about confrontation, respect, and celebrity boundaries. By the time the segment ended, the panelists were visibly exhausted. Ruth tried to inject levity, commenting lightly on the next topic, but it fell flat. Denise sat silently, occasionally smoothing her hair, staring at the desk, as if replaying every exchange in her mind. She had faced a live audience, a legendary guest, and the scrutiny of millions, and now she had to process the fallout. As the cameras finally cut to a commercial break, the studio seemed to exhale collectively. The intensity of the confrontation had left its mark, an unforgettable moment that would linger in conversations, headlines, and social media long after the show had ended. The final chapter of the day's episode unfolded with a tense undercurrent. With Petula Clark gone and the incident still fresh in everyone's minds, the Loose Women's studio felt smaller, heavier, and almost claustrophobic. The audience sat quietly, unsure whether to applaud the remaining segments or to continue processing what they had just witnessed. Cameras rolled, capturing every subtle shift in body language, every forced smile, and every word that seemed measured and cautious. Denise Welch attempted to regain some composure, straightening her notes and adopting a calm tone. But the fire in her eyes was tempered by a flicker of doubt. Deep down, she realized that the confrontation had left a permanent impression, not just on the viewers, but on her co-hosts and even the crew. She had intended to hold Petula accountable, to challenge a public figure. But the aftermath was more complex than she had anticipated. Ruth Langford stepped in, trying to stabilize the mood. "Let's focus on our next topic," she suggested gently. Her voice was warm, practiced, but carried a weight of seriousness. Even as she spoke, the other panelists knew that the tension from earlier would not dissipate immediately. Janet Street Porter nodded, still exchanging glances with Colleen Nolan, whose hands fidgeted nervously. The dynamic had shifted. The camaraderie that usually flowed naturally across the desk was replaced by a subtle unease, each member wary of the next comment or gesture. Meanwhile, the audience remained attentive, whispers rippling through the rows as they speculated about the confrontation. Phones were out, social media was alive with trending hashtags, and clips of Petula's calm but decisive walk-off circulated rapidly online. The moment had become more than a studio incident. It was now a viral event, a cultural talking point that would dominate conversations for days. Denise tried to speak, her voice steady but carrying an edge of defensiveness. "I asked the questions viewers wanted answers to," she said, glancing at Ruth and Janet for support. "If she couldn't handle them, that's her choice." Ruth nodded gently, trying to acknowledge Denise's perspective while subtly reminding her that the situation had escalated beyond expectations. There's a difference between asking tough questions and creating conflict that leaves everyone uncomfortable, she said carefully. Colleen added softly, "Petula handled herself with grace. That's the part people will remember. And it reflects on all of us, how we conduct ourselves on air, how we manage these moments." As the show wrapped up, the studio lights dimmed slightly. The cameras finally powered down, and the crew began quietly moving through the set. The audience applauded, albeit unevenly, acknowledging both the segments and the tension they had witnessed. Denise collected her notes, straightened her jacket, and briefly looked at the empty guest chair, a silent reminder of the extraordinary events that had unfolded. By the time everyone exited the studio, the story was already circulating online. Interviews and debates were starting, and hashtags were trending worldwide. The day had started like any other, but it ended as a historic example of what happens when confrontation, celebrity, and live television collide. And for the panel, the crew, and the viewers, it was an unforgettable lesson in tension, perception, and the unpredictable power of live media.